La 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 la. Sybel Specter, strange stories. Hello, and welcome to Sybel Specter's Strange Stories, or I'm Sybel Specter. I'm glad you heard my call. Was it the knocker knocking or a skittering from the attic? I'll let you think the decision to be here was your own. It was. I have a story to tell you. I must, or else. Is your home haunted? Of course it is. All homes are. Even if you don't believe in vampires or specters, which are real if you dig through the layers of worlds. So is the world round? Never mind. You must believe in the ghosts of your mind, the imprint of memories left in rooms, on furniture, where pithy life occurred. Still, if haunted houses are only somewhere you visit in October, then that's a life unloved, audience. My village of Ilum was constructed flimsily with the aim of suggesting superstition and spookiness. Much of the village was a facade. Extras lived in open air behind flat exteriors. Some were actual, simple structures that were empty on the inside save for liquor bottles and trash. The only dwellings that were filled with shelves of books, furnished, humane, were the ones that appeared in the film that never was. My home was furnished, but that was because I took from the other buildings. Typically, it was a repetitive cycle of taking, me taking, them taking from me, and on until I came to you. That first home is still within me. This house is where I became me, your heroine. Sometimes, though, this home is fantastic. I curl up in this armchair and dream of my estates, castles, mansions, maybe an island. That's what we must aim for if we want to be part of the big production. Today, I have 3 stories for you. These are all about haunted houses and women, the special relationship they share. You know how the old saying goes, a house's place is in the woman. This one is called the Anchoress. Helena wondered if she was pregnant, though she hadn't had that kind of sex in years when nausea took her from dreamless sleep, sliced light in her eyes despite blackout curtains and eye-covered eye shades that became a silken crown by morning. She didn't think that the tube of fried chicken encasing gluey cheese from the gas station was the culprit. It was all her body asked for lately. Every cell screamed in thanks when she braved the scalding oil that shot through the crumb coating with the first bite. No, this wasn't food churning inside of her. It wasn't life, though how could she be sure when she'd little lived? There was a sense that she was locked within herself, causing her to half-act with resignation and a sense of stuck. Helena ran to the bathroom and kneeled on the cool pink tile. She opened her mouth and closed her eyes. There wasn't the awful chunky vomit that required surrender. She was stabbed in gut and throat and the roof of her mouth. Then there was a plop in the toilet. She blinked to a long silver nail covered in pink tissue and blood floating in the water so limpid that it seemed imbued with enchantment. She plunged her hand into the water before the nail sank into the mouth of the toilet. Rinsed, it looked new, unworn by time, uneaten by stomach acid. This wasn't true for the next nail that shot out with a cough and landed in the bathroom door. By morning, she sat in front of a hill of nails of various sizes and ages, bent and straight, rusty and gleaming in the harsh dawn. The pink insulation was hardly better than the nails. It clogged her esophagus and stuffed her throat. She had to dig inside of herself to pull it out. The first cleared breath was what an autumn morning must have been on the hip of a mountain centuries ago. That breath was her one mercy before planks of wood stretched her skin from the inside like some kind of cartoon she grew up with. Her skin expanded but didn't split. It bled but didn't kill her. A forest fell from her, born from the ground as log and plank, cleaned of twigs, leaves, and bark for the most part. Her lips formed a perfect O for the pebbles, widening for the blocks and the stones she couldn't have carried in her arms but were held by her body. Next came the roof. She choked up terracotta and thatch, slate and bitumen. It littered her tiny house, which was her intended home, her office, her theater, her bar, her place of worship. All the world compacted beyond recognition, stilling her within it. Home was where she laid around, wanting. To dance, to watch a movie enthralled, to be on her knees at midnight, back arched, eyes rolled in the back of her head as she felt great energy move through her sensitized body. She piled everything in the center of her living room, dragging concrete as she spat jewel-toned glass. She survived arched stone and wooden doors. There were ornate newel posts and fireplace mantels with carved chimeras. A glass shower door shattered when she ran outside to purge because her apartment was stuffed. There was no longer room for her to stand. It had started to look like her mother's house, everything kept, all things sacred as long as it belonged to the past. She understood herself as a hoarder, too, while she looked inside from across the threshold of the front door at all she'd excreted, body jellied and tensed at once, pained to the point of bliss, of no more. Then came the furniture. She took on the growling tone of a demon, to not half think or think, but to voice, "God, please, I can't take this anymore." She heard the voice of the memory of a mother say, "God gives you more than you can handle, so that a new you can emerge to bear that immense burden." She gagged on hay-filled mattresses and ottomans, the furnishings of the Stone Age of her elementary school classroom, and the plush velvet and heavy wood of royalty only witnessed in castles visited through her various screens. By the time the articles of daily life, the cutlery, underthings, books, and images and paint and film, the soaps, clothing, herbs, meat, toilet paper, chamber pots, needles, all the things needed and wanted scraped her tongue, she'd given herself over. She held the door of herself open to it all. Now she understood herself as storage. She dimly noticed an audience form around her, and so inhumanely they didn't film her, nor did they call for help or rub her on the back and say, "Sweetie, are you okay?" or "Dear, oh dear, what can I do?" They watched, still and silent, they observed. An embryo was the last thing to fall from her. It came from a teardrop and landed on a bed of lace. What animal it was, she couldn't be sure. A cracking distracted her. She pocketed the amniotic sac as the walls of the tiny house fell open like a trap door unlocked. The crowd began the taking. Hungry animals to scraps of meat. People to big sales when Black Friday meant something. Soon, most of it was gone. Helena went to work on construction with what remained. There was no rationale to the building supplies. She could have constructed any type of architecture from all history. She knew nothing of building, not even furniture that came with an Allen wrench and labels. She let the tranced self take her hands. As her fingers calloused, she healed. Helena labored for 28 days. The completed home was mixed and matched from shack and castle, from Victorian to cave to a ticky-tacky house of yesterday. It was, to her desire. She entered through the front door as the head and heart of an impassioned body. Helena took 5 steps and fell into an earthen hole 3 feet wide, 8 feet long, and 6 feet deep. Dirt fell into her mouth as she laughed. She climbed out of her grave. So began her life. She never left the house again, though each day people came to her kitchen window. They had deep and dumb conversations. The visitors brought gifts. Helena gave them bread and advice and locked the latch in the evenings and lost herself to all kinds of prayer. Wouldn't we all like to upchuck our dream homes? Once I vomited up a tiny phallus inside of a dinky toy car, but nothing so useful as construction materials. In truth, I'd hate to be confined like that, even in one of my dream homes. Don't you say that I'm trapped here. Nina, my discoverer, wouldn't do that. I know I can walk out of that door whenever I want. The next tale involves the kind of haunted house you visit with friends, all standing in line, telling each other how unafraid you are, while thinking of excuses to turn around and go home as you near the portal to your horrific death. Or so I've heard. I've never visited a haunted house, but I will once I turn that filigree knob and step out for the night. This story is titled The Monk. Katerina, a tall, heavy woman with an unhappy face, pulled into the parking lot of the old warehouse, hoping she wouldn't be a killer clown again that night. She preferred passive roles like doll on a shelf or figurehead of a ship. She'd never had an interest nor distaste for horror. Katerina would watch a slasher in theaters or dress up like a slutty ghost for a pub crawl each Halloween season and then set her sights on Christmas. Last year, her friends wanted to go to a haunted attraction called Mythmakers that had been open so long that her mother had childhood memories of visiting there. The haunted house was one of those things Katerina said she'd get to next year. She'd been repeating this since middle school. Her life had been a series of one days, left to possibility and therefore certainty. She bought a ticket for Mythmakers online the night before her friends planned to go, then woke in the morning with the excited dread that colors the day of a haunted house visit. The what if? What if the monsters touch me? What if I lose my mind as promised? She spent the day scrolling through her phone and watching night vision videos of people screaming instead of checking off the long list of Wednesday to-dos that'd take any ambitious person a month to accomplish. A goblin laughed in her ear as she got out of her car in the Mythmakers parking lot. He had yellow eyes and a blood-stained mouth. She didn't react. She gazed into his pupils, stillness possessing her, until he turned away. She met her friends in the long line, and they shuffled forward together through metal barricades. A recording promised terror, and asked customers to not touch the actors as synth music blocked out the possibility of coherent thought. They heard screams as they neared the entrance. Reality and artifice faded as an undead soldier told them to go, go, go. Her friend Michael turned and ran as soon as they stepped into a purple-lit spinning tunnel, where they were met by a creature crawling at their feet. Katerina stayed in the middle of her group, wanting it to be over with, though she was enjoying looking at the thoughtful chaos of detail. They got to a room that was an attic of a very old, evil-infested house in a countryside that couldn't exist anymore. She scanned the cobwebbed room filled with the junk of life, watching an undead man in the fireplace until he proved to be an animatronic when the head of her group triggered its sensor. Soon, the demons in the walls will be talking to you, it repeated. There was a woman painted to look like wood in the corner. She was a figurehead torn from a ship, landed in this room where the past became unstoried except for unease. No one else noticed the woman, and the actor didn't seem to register them. She stared into space, blinking and serene. Katerina looked back as they exited the room. The woman's chest lifted with a deep sigh. After they exited the show through the roar of a chainsaw, they stood around the parking lot eating donut holes that bled berry jam. Occasionally, an actor would creep up behind them, but Katerina didn't give them the jump scare they sought. Her friend said that the haunt must have really gotten to her. Usually, she performed conversation for them. She returned 5 more times that season, watching the figurehead, a different actor each time, who only once turned her eyes and shot out a hand at the patron in front of her. There were other watchers in different roles who seemed like monks to her in their measured movements and silences. By the next September, she was sitting on a squeaking stool backstage at Mythmakers, eyes closed while a makeup artist airbrushed her to look like a scowling vampire. That was her first role. She was expected to laugh and dance, to get close to customers without touching them. It was disappointing that she was meant to be frenzied, but it turned out the part wasn't active enough. She couldn't bring her phone with her into the haunt. It was her and the biggest water bottle she could find at TJ Maxx. It was a slow night. She passed time by observing the room she'd been placed in, the Weeping Angel and Reaper, the graves and skulls. She felt naked in her costume when the first customers walked through, a group of 5 who shrieked when she jumped out at them from the corner. It was then she realized they were inside of the story together, but the guests would soon leave. She was being initiated to a reality that would expand and blend with every other reality. Her appearance gave her power that she was yet uncertain how to exercise. The feeling faded as the room emptied. She bounced on her heels and waited for her shift to end as her mind repeated the action of scrolling. Occasionally, the lead actor assigned to her would check in to make sure she had plenty of water and twice to give her a 15-minute break, or she would exit commotion to a dirty room where sweaty people sat around with masks on or off, eating from little packets of candy and staring at their phones. With one eye, she looked at her screen, with the other at the actors dressed as themselves, which is why they worked at Mythmakers for minimum wage. Then she returned to smoke, sound, darkness, and animatronics. This was a world, Halloween world. The monster popping out of the curtain, returning to his phone after patrons went on their way. The skeleton nailed to the wall in the corner of the room, passing eternity. This was the world. Nothing to fear. Everything as it was. Katerina was a watchful spirit the next night. It was a Friday, still early in the October season, so people only passed through every 5 to 10 minutes. The junk food of her mind presented itself to her this night. Consciously, she stood back from her thoughts and watched in horror as the contents of song, pop star, memory of insecurity, long-standing fantasy of longing reeled off without her. She sweat herself slick in her mask. All of her was enclosed in silicone. She wasn't so eager to take off her ghastly face at the end of the night, to return it to the employees who sprayed it with disinfectant, to remove her costume and throw it into a bin for laundering. To use cold cream to wipe off blacked-out eyes meant to hide all traces of humanity. She sat in the dressing room and watched the other actors eat refreshing ice cream and make plans. They enjoyed the scaring enough, but the work was for this, for each other, who were too weird for their lives. Katerina mostly kept to herself. Sometimes she talked to people who opened themselves to her, assuming trust in her because she was sitting on the thin, stained carpeting of backstage with everyone else. One woman wearing bloody coveralls told her how she and her partner drove from 2 hours away for each shift, but were moving to be close to Mythmakers. Another man, who became the closest thing she had to an acquaintance at the haunt, told her about his lost job and the multiple cancers that erupted in his body in the last year. Scare acting was now his only job. There were the grandmothers, the disabled, the near children, the 4 jobbers, the divergent, the all at once, all present. The world bled in and bled out. It concentrated. Everyone dreaded the end of October. Each walk from the dressing room, or at the top of the stairs, she saw the overview of the maze, the wiring and planks of construction, until she passed behind a thick dark curtain and entered the noise, was a ritual. She went deeper into some silence that gave way to presence as the season went on. This silence was not passive. She stared into patrons' eyes. Often, they maintained eye contact with her until they left her room, uncomfortable or laced with wonder, depending on the mask that looked back at them. She didn't stare into their cores, but what had become their centers. They'd become fundamentally glazed with toughness or nonchalance. They were vulnerable, not like children, but as a condition lost to most through time, until time becomes cruel and weakens the body and mind to infancy, unlike the true condition of life's beginning, where there is natural insensitivity to others. Sometimes they reached out and brushed her hand with theirs to see if she was real. Then they'd giggle at the warmth and texture of her human skin. She unwound her aggression and lashed it like a whip from her mouth, where she spat threats at boys who mocked her, the spit only going so far as the inside of her silicone mask. Or her body became quick and tough as she took off after someone who wasn't scared enough. She was punched once. Her instructions were to only alert the managerial staff if the attack was malicious, not if it stemmed from fear. She'd found this wrong at first, the height of the customer is always right. But when the teenager who walked around with his fists bunched up around his neck struck her, she only felt closer to life. It was unlike the other times she'd been punched, kicked, or slapped. Monsters were not killers and CEOs. The ones who hurt those closest to them were the most human. Those who injured far and wide were not human at all, a trait born and earned. It was often said that there were no monsters, no evil, only humanity. Katerina harshly agreed. She absolved everyone. Each increasing night, the cacophony paired with the alone with herself she was forced into, brought her to her mind. And with zombie werewolf doll, it mattered less the intelligence or original nature of thought, only that it was hers, which meant it was certain and beyond her too. A sharp-eared creature passed, carrying a sticker-covered water bottle. Each thing as it is, she thought, as she waved back, then shot out a hand at a cowering child. She came close to Curls, but knew that she wouldn't reach the boy's precious head. She walked out into an October 30th that was as it should have been. Cool. Cloud-covered moon, smoke pervading the air. The last screams were behind her. Mythmakers was 2 miles from the basement apartment she rented from an ad placed on Facebook Marketplace. Usually, she took her Prius for ease in the company of a podcast, but she'd started to walk to and from work by mid-October. She arrived by foot faster than in her car. The walk that night was the same as it had been in October 2001. Headlights shone on a stop sign as she entered her neighborhood of 1980s homes and deflated pumpkins. A car slowed next to her and rolled with her pace. She turned and let her eyes adjust to the interior darkness where a man sat in the driver's seat. He wore Coke bottle glasses. His hair was pulled into a tiny bun at the nape of his neck. She couldn't tell if it was a costume. He watched her. He drove straight, though he didn't look at the road. Katerina matched his gaze. All makeup had been washed from her except a line of white in her hairline. The man rolled down his window. Orange streetlight reflected in his glasses. She stopped. The car braked. Still, all was still, even the wind that blew from hanging on leaves. The man leaned over and popped open the passenger door. She jogged around like a girl and got inside the heated interior. Off, Katerina went. Note: the first line of this story is a slight edit of Katerina, a tall, heavy girl with an unhappy face questions Freud and rouses him from his daydreams. This quote is from page 43 of the essay, The Guilty One, by Catherine Clément, in the book The Newly Born Woman by Hélène Zixous and Catherine Clément. I can't say I relate to Katerina. All I do is sit with myself unless I'm with you, audience. I find no difficulty in sitting quietly for hours at a time. Thinking or not thinking, the distinction between the two is less noticeable than you'd imagine. Oh yes, I know my mind and enjoy it. I do identify with the acceptance that permeates Katerina by the end. She reminds me of the protagonist in our last story, because there is only one figure who can be so unconditional in their love, and that is the mother. I wasn't haunted, but a mother has an impossible time of not becoming what she holds and is responsible for. If everything inside of me is haunted, then so am I. I was number 118, a modern 9-room home ordered from a Sears catalog in 1909 and constructed by father, mother, daughter, and son under the glaring blue sky of summer. They painted me lilac with mint trim. Their sweat and bloody accidents were absorbed into me. My splinters were rejected by their skin. I didn't care for this family at first. It takes time to go from many little parts to one being, stomped on, weighed down, holed, and occasionally burned. The children were nearly grown before I settled into state of permanently pregnant. My life was life, but I came to understand human existence as movement, except when they slept and became houses themselves. My love for them didn't settle until 1928 when the Jeffers family became mine. All mine. Always mine. I thought we'd disintegrate together. I'd collapse into the earth, everything bones and dirt. No one moved into me, restored, or raised me. I was rarely visited. There was one house built way down the road in the 1940s, but it wasn't until the late 60s that the horizon began to grow identical forms. I transformed into Clyde Manor in 1978. Siblings, Arthur and Margot Carson, bought me for next to nothing. I have a soft spot for brothers and sisters because of the Jeffers siblings. I wasn't aware that I'd been for sale, unwanted, already feared for decades before I became a haunted attraction. Arthur and Margot went to work on me again. I witnessed nails in their mouths, arguments over wiring, and the disaster of plumbing that they couldn't laugh about until the 21st century rolled around. They renovated only what was necessary so that it wouldn't be a true death trap. Holes in the walls remained. Skeletons of rats, possums, raccoons, cats, and 2 dogs stayed. Free decoration. The Carsons had little money to begin with, and less when they were done with restoration. Some of their items came from costume stores, but most of it was sourced from things found and bartered for. What they possessed was a passion for horror. Giallos, Draculas, and exploitation films. They talked about them as they lay on my floor at night, a pizza box and a 6-pack between them. I hoped to meet Christopher Lee and Ingrid Pitt. One of them passed through in the 90s when my legend spread. My preparation took 3 months. Then there was the task of making me a story by filling me with fear. Mothers often say their lives began when they first held their babies. I heard a grandmother tell a pregnant woman on my front porch that she couldn't remember her life before her children. The essence of this is true for me. The Jeffers family made me a mother when they became bones played off as fakes until the internet made rumors become cause for investigation. Then, there was a man who died in a bedroom in 1966, a needle stuck in his arm. Not even the Carsons found the runaway girl. Children are so good at stuffing their tiny bodies into places they don't belong. I wasn't visited much, but it happened. I held life outside of my definition of it. There were people or animals or furniture chosen and cared for until there was no one around to dust and polish. I became haunted, as all mothers are when they reach their fullest potential, when I was filled with objects random and of forgotten origins. Now comes the time to list my children for you. Let me tell you what I presented to screaming folks. The articles I still bear. Jars of coins and chains and this and that. Baby dolls, whole or broken to pieces, naked and humiliated in their lost beauty. Televisions with busted screens. Mannequin heads picked up from behind a beauty school placed inside of them. Floppy old shoes. There are no ghosts of feet within them. The traces of humanity matter little. Baskets of straw and hairballs. Waterlocked books open to 2 watching and wanting pages. Trays of silver longing for jams and spills from saucers. Broken clocks. Not right twice a day because they are stopped in their time. Reels of cloth draped over wooden beams and human forms, found stained or dyed by the Carsons. Bicycles put down and never picked up again until they were hung from the ceiling of the attic. Taxidermy of hunted animals and precious pets, more animated with false eyes and stuffed interiors. Gravestones made of cardboard and styrofoam. Gravestones of stone, taken from cemeteries in the night when the world was less watched. 2 chests offered with the stipulation that they couldn't be opened until after purchase. The bills, identification forms, letters, torn photos, sample perfumes, petals, undergarments, candy bars, rollers, little pots of cosmetics, scarves, jar of hoped-for baby, pills, and wedding rings within the chests. Then the chandeliers who never wanted to be freed from their dust. Estate sale clothing, grateful to be released from skin. My God, all the mannequins. Record players, speakers, all the fake blood, the other blood, insects, real and fake. Later, the addition of animatronics. There is more, much more. But does a spider remember each of her many babies? Of course. Maybe I'll tell you from the earth or junkyard or from the homes of the morbid and nostalgic who buy pieces of me to say they have me. These things I hold are things, though the true nightmare of a mechanical groan is nearing. It isn't those who once possessed them, filled them, used them that make them alive. They are closer to the foundational nature of life in their itemness. I'll say it. I'm closer to God than you are. I'm of God. To be a mother is to be in terror. To be mother is to nurture with a velvety groundedness that soothes all to the truth that it will be all right before the end. So many feet and screams ran through me in nearly 50 years. Clyde Manor made lists of best haunts in the state, the South, and the country. Cameras captured me and the inhabitants of my womb. It was some kid with a camera who undid us. They didn't believe the legend of real bodies, that first family. But their viewers did. Viewership is powerful. Soon, the authorities were searching and they found what they weren't looking for because they'd thought, dumb kids. Arthur's mortal life was over by then. Margot dug him up and put him in the corner he'd told her he wanted to spend eternal life in ever since they had started dreaming Clyde Manor. Margot made a stake from my exterior so she would never know any prison. The machine is knocking at my front door. I hope to haunt, but spirit is a human matter. I will be scattered and bound to earth until one day I and all of my children are atomized by some kind of sun. Poor mother. There truly is no harder job. I've never dreamed of being a mother, though I might consider it when it is time for a rebrand. I have been equated to a house, something, not someone, who can fit a lot inside of her. I wonder how this house is haunted. Certainly, there is a knocking in the closet. I hear voices outside of the door and windows. When the clock struck midnight, I began to hear strange sounds, loud in my ears with no visible source. Is that you I hear, audience? You must not abandon me in one of the small, unlit rooms of your mind. We've only just begun to build our home, our set, our world together. next time.